Hi everyone, I'm Curtis Judd, and this is Time and Light, the online show about the craft of photography. In episode 3 here, we're going to talk a little bit about using flash to create a high contrast image of a small item, so something that you do kind of on a macro basis, or not even truly macro, but just something close up. And what I've got here is our gingerbread house, which you saw out on the website. And if you haven't, you can go check that out to see what the effect is that we're aiming for here. Here's a quick view of it. Got my camera set up on a tripod, so we're all good there. So I don't have to worry about stabilizing that while we're working here. A couple of accessories, obviously a little flash here. In this particular case, I'm using a Nikon SB800, and this offers a couple of nice features, which I believe the Canon 580X2 or 580X also provides. It has the ability to zoom, which will come in handy since we're trying to do kind of a very tight sort of spotlight on the gingerbread house itself. And obviously, as you can see, we have plenty of ambient light, which we don't necessarily want in our image. And we're going to talk about how you can control that, bring the ambient light way, way down, and use the flash as the primary light as a flash, or as a spotlight. I also have here a remote cable. There are Nikon and Canon and Sony and Pentax and Olympus versions of that as well. That just allows us to get the flash up off the camera a little bit and bring it in from a different angle. In this case, we're going to come straight down on the house to get that high contrast spotlight kind of look for it. So let's get things hooked up here and show you what it looks like. First of all, I've got the camera I've got it already set up and composed, so I've already figured out where I want everything in the frame, and we're all set to go there. So we'll go ahead and hook up the flash here with our remote cable. Hook that into the hot shoe. Connect this, there we go, to the flash, and we're good to go. Now, before we turn this on, the first thing we're going to do, because we want to control this ambient light, we really don't want the ambient light. I want everything to be dark around in the entire image except for the gingerbread house itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my camera on. I typically shoot in aperture priority mode, and in this case, when we're getting the ambient exposure levels, we want to switch into aperture priority mode. And what that does is that'll let us use the camera's light meter to understand what a proper exposure would look like if we were going to use the ambient light. And we need to get that first because we want to essentially squelch the ambient light. We want to get rid of it. So I have that set on to aperture priority mode, and it looks like I set my aperture to f11, and I am getting a reading of 1/10 of a second. So if I were to take an exposure here, 1/10 of a second, f11, that is what we'd be looking at. And that obviously is not what we want. We've got a really noisy, busy background, not the look we're going for at all. So with that knowledge, what I can do now is I can switch to manual mode, and this is one of those scenarios where you use manual mode to creatively control the light. And while we're in manual mode, I know that my particular camera, and you'll have to check your camera manual if you don't know the answer to this, but I can take it up to 1/500th of a second to sync with my flash. There is going to be a maximum shutter speed for most cameras to which you can go and still sync with your flash. In my case, it's 1/500th. So that's a lot of stops. It's several stops above where we were. So if you count up, so we were exposing at 1/10 of a second to get the proper exposure according to the light meter. If we doubled that, that would be, let's see, 1/20th, 1/40th, 1/80th, 1/160th. You get the idea. We're probably in the 6 to 7 stop range difference. And when you do that, so now I have it set at 1/500th at f11, you can see quite a big bit of difference. Now I have black everywhere, which is what I want. And now I can bring in the flash and light just the portions of the image that I'm interested in. And in this case, that's going to be our gingerbread house. Now I have a few options here with the light that I'm using, and again, in your case, you may have a similar thing, unless you're using one of the full manual flashes, and we'll talk about that in a minute. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and just leave it in the balanced fill mode. So that's a TT. It's on my little screen here. It'll say TTL BL. That is and essentially that's the most automatic mode you can use on the Nikon line of flashes. Canon has similar, and all the other manufacturers also have similar. So while we're in that mode, one thing I want to do is I want to create a pretty contrasty image here. So I'm actually, first what I'll do is just go ahead and let it expose the image, and we'll see what we get. And just another note here, I'm going to hold this pretty close to the gingerbread house, because again, the closer you hold your light, the softer it's going to be. So I'm not using any sort of modifier, so if I were to hold it back quite a bit, the problem with holding it back is even if I zoom in on the flash, that is, I'm going to fill too large of an area, and I don't want the light to spill over too far, so I want to stay in pretty tight. And one other setting I have on my flash here is the ability to manually control the zoom level. By default, it's in an auto mode, and I'm using a 20mm lens here. It takes me to a zoom level of 24mm, which is the widest that it can go. But I want to zoom that in because, again, I just want to illuminate the gingerbread house and nothing else. I don't want to get very much of the counter at all. So I'm going to zoom it into 105mm. And let's go ahead and take our first exposure and see how that turns out. And again, holding it down in pretty tight. And there we go. Okay, that's not quite as bright as I was hoping, not as contrasty, so I'm going to just bump that up. You just use the up arrow on this particular flash. Check the manual for yours. And that I'm going to just bump it up by 2/3 of a exposure value, 2/3 of a stop, and do it again. Okay, and that gets us right where we want to be. You may have to tweak things a little bit, move the flash around just to make sure you illuminate the exact parts of the image that you're interested in illuminating, and that you don't get too much spill on either side. And have everything illuminated the way you want. So that was just a really quick tutorial in how to creatively control the ambient light to get the effect you want in a low-key type of image. Thanks for checking us out. We'll be back again soon.